Only 10. No, only 10. Wow. I forget our anniversary. Sure.
Okay, we have about 1 minute before we start. Please remember to scan in and out of the room. The last couple of people come in and shut the door. Okay, everyone, it's 3 o'clock, so let's get started. If I could ask you to shut the door in the back, please. So welcome back to our afternoon session. This session is leveraging your team's diversity. So I'm happy to present Alvin Pilobello here. Alvin is a former water engineer turned leadership development facilitator and coach, designing custom-made leadership development programs across Canada, the US, and Europe. Alvin believes in the power of developing crucial conversation skills to help people thrive in cross-functional collaborative teams so that they unlock the innovative capacity of their teams and nurture the person behind each professional. So, and I was lucky enough to attend one of his sessions last year on allyship, and it was a very, very engaging discussions that were happening, and it was a great presentation. And I know for myself, it actually sparked me making a career change after that session. So I think you guys will really enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And hello, everyone. I know I'm standing between you and the rest of the day. But thank you for attending and being here. As Tara alluded to, this session here is not going to be a traditional PowerPoint presentation in that I'm downloading, imparting wisdom or knowledge onto you. It's going to be a little bit more participatory. So what I'd love for it to be is actually more conversational. So as I ask questions, if you feel compelled to share and share your perspective on some of the questions that I ask, that would really help with the learning in the room, because a big part of today is about understanding the different perspectives that exist in the room, especially with the teams that you lead. So where's the clicker? Here we go. So given that the topic is about diversity, what is diversity to you? And I'll hold silences for a little longer, so it doesn't have to feel too uncomfortable. Perspective, you said? Perspectives. Thank you. Different life experiences. Yeah.
Okay.
Holding space for people. Interesting. Say more about that. Mm-hmm. Thank you. You've probably seen, oh, yeah, Kapna. Yeah. Yes.
Bye.
We have one over here. Sure, yeah. I may need support with distributing the mic. Gotcha. Thank you. Who's seen a similar version of this before? Iceberg. It's the thing that's visible, such as skin color, age, race, gender. These are the things that we often associate with diversity, which is when I see you, I can put a label to it. I can put a label to who you might be. So if you're looking at me, Asian, male, what other labels come up for you? And promise you, I will not be offended. What other labels might you use for me right now?
Brown skin.
Brown skin, yeah. Middle-aged, yes. Anyone else? Shout it out. Say that again. Yeah. And then there's all of the diversity labels that we might not see. Like, how much money did I have growing up? And how does that inform how I make decisions in my life and at work? What is my learning style? So if you're leading me and I'm on your team, what does that mean for how I need to be led and how I need to learn? What values do I hold? What's important to me? So if you were speaking to me and really wanted to motivate me, what do you need to know about me in order to do that effectively? So we'll be revisiting this iceberg a little bit later, of course. But why is this important and why now? Now just reflect on that. Why is having a better handle on diversity, inclusion, how we include each other on teams, why is this important right now? And for those in the virtual audience, if you share something in the chat, hopefully someone can share what's in the chat as well in the back. Tara, yeah, why is it important right now?
So I think in our industry currently, we're struggling to fill positions. There are a nationwide shortage of operators. So, which means we need to tap into every person out there. We can't afford to not be inclusive. And then the other piece I was going to say is that having a diverse workforce will lead to efficiencies and I think just a more positive workplace.
When people feel like they can belong and their perspectives are
Absolutely
included. Yeah. Other perspectives, Cotton.
So it was interesting. Yesterday, we were talking to one of our directors who leads a program at a college. And she says that what's bizarre is that there is such a shortage of operators. And yet, when she looks at these grads coming through her program, there's one group that is very difficult to place in terms of positions. And that group is an immigrant brown female.
And what did they understand about why it is difficult and why it's a barrier?
They're different on every single front. Immigrant, female, non-white.
So statistically, that's the biggest gap.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts around why is this topic important now?
So I would just add that because our industry has been very traditional and very conservative, I think it's fair to say that. Why now? Because we can't wait any longer. We're behind.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Let's check in with yourself right now. It's often when I ask people to share, there's this feeling of, ooh, I have a thought, but I'm not sure if I should share it in front of everyone. There's this feeling of potentially discomfort or, well, what if I don't say the exact right thing in this moment? And you want it to be the perfect answer that is valuable for everyone in the room. That similar discomfort exists when my perspective isn't necessarily welcome, or I don't know how it's going to land. If I share, for example, that I'm an engineer in a room full of operators. How might that be perceived? So a big part of today is having the conversations so that we can actually understand each other a little bit better, that we can bridge some of the assumptions that we hold that may not necessarily be accurate or correct, or it could be correct, but we want to have those conversations in order to validate them. So intention for today is, this isn't a training on DEI. It's not a training on diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity. This is about forming meaningful connections with the people that we work with, whether it's at this conference or when you go back to your teams, to understand each other a little bit better. The first half, and I'll go through the agenda, the first half is really the basic conversational skills where we can ask better questions and hold better space for people. So how do we listen a little bit more effectively? And I'll demo that with a colleague. And then the second half is going to be about how do we, once we build that trust, what happens when we break the trust? How do we repair relationships through conversation? So the first half will be a little bit more comfortable. The second half may be less so, because we'll be using a real scenario that actually happened to a colleague. So first, I'll demo through a conversation, and then I'll do a demo in the second half as well. And we'll also make time for takeaways and question and answer for later. What you can expect from me is there is no wrong answer in this room. So I want this to, instead of being fail safe, to be safe to fail, if that's how one sees failure. My role is to facilitate a conversation. I'm not here to necessarily teach. So an important part of this is it's more up to you to see what are you going to be taking away from this for yourself. Because I can't assume that I know what you need to learn. That doesn't make sense. But as we go through the conversations, and the more that everyone shares in this room, the more learning that might actually be possible between each other. You'll be learning from each other as much as, or even more than you'll be learning from me. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them in throughout the session. And, because I hold the agenda in my head, if it's better to hold it for later, then we'll parking lot the questions for later. The other thing here is confidentiality. Now, of course, I can't enforce that in a room of people that don't necessarily know each other, but we may have people that share their experiences and share experiences that may not necessarily be comfortable. So we want to honor people's experiences and validate that. And don't go back and say, well, so-and-so said this about their employer, blah, blah, blah. So hold that confidentiality if you could. And I mentioned about making this as conversational as possible. It's more one-to-many. So as you share, as you become more comfortable with sharing, not only would I love that, it would actually boost the learning in the room. So just a quick icebreaker. Within your tables or the people around you, answer some of these questions. When you look back to a critical moment in your career where you felt like you actually belonged on a team, what did that feel like? Saw some of the eyes grow a little bit bigger. Like, when did I last belong on a team where I actually felt like I belonged? And what is it that the people around you did that made you feel like you belonged? And or what did you do to help along feeling like you belonged? So I'll have you chat among yourselves. I'll give you a couple of minutes and then I'll raise my hand and then we'll bring it back and continue the presentation. All right. Change leaders. And if someone's sitting alone, one thing you can do to help them belong is to draw them in. Invite.
Yeah. That's very cool. Tell me more about that. Yeah. Very cool. Oh my God. Okay. I remember this one time, it's funny, this manager, his name is Sanjay, and me and my other colleague would always be like, this is JJ, because he always made us feel like one team. And so he was like, hey guys, I was thinking about this problem last night, went to bed, and I dreamt about it, and like, I think I found a way out. And he was like, what do you two think? Like it was entirely his idea. Like he's like 35 years experience. Right. But he came to us and like shared the idea. And we were like, yep, that's the idea. That's the win. And but he shared it with us. And it made it seem like we came up with it, but we absolutely did not. And so we had this joke of like how we should get bracelets and have it WWSD. And like actually I went back into Toronto a couple months ago. And again, he's like 5, we're in our 30s and we all had dinner and it's just I'll never forget. He just always had a way of making you feel like it was your idea. Right. And not take ownership for it. Yeah. Those are cool. Yeah. 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 Any stories? Oh, sir. Yeah, I think feeling like part of a team is for me. So I just see this role with what he's saying. It's very often I teach you what scripted work, the experience that we brought. And I think language is getting guys. Yeah, when you start getting invited to conversations, and it's incredible. So ways to sort of say, oh, the team thought my instead of that. It's happening. Doing brainstorming with celebrity for ideas where if I get to turn brainstorm myself, or lecture, they're going to come and we got just really sense. And you create sounds so much supporting building a team. You get mad at me when I lead teams because I always want to be on every email. And I want everyone to be on every email because you never know when someone's going to bail for vacation. And I want everyone to be able to learn by osmosis. Yeah, there's a lot of context and nuance to life. But people are like, well, I don't want to be on email unless there's an action for me. And I was like, trust me, I want to be on the emails because you're going to learn and feel like you're part. Then you'll know what everyone's talking about. But people really hate that. It's true. Just get really overwhelmed with emails and like aren't able to prioritize for this action anymore. But I'm always
I'll
like,
give you another 60 seconds here to wrap up the conversations.
Oh, and my side, like I work, I work. So.
but
All right. We'll bring it to a close for now. Probably not everyone got a chance to share. But what did you hear? Just popcorn style it. What were some of the things that people experienced when they felt they belonged? We'll have you repeat it so people can hear it.
I just said CC'd on an email.
Ah, Thank you.
So inclusion. At our group, one of the things we talked about was leadership.
Leadership.
And another thing that we talked about in a way was recognition in both ways, in terms of recognition of the leader's abilities and the leader giving recognition to teammates.
A recognition of the people that they're leading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Others, what did people experience?
You guys want to share?
Um, we found a little bit of a common denominator when things were different, out of the normal. The example was when there was some fires. It was more exhilarating for a period of time during that work portion, or commissioning out of a plant. It was just out of the normal, and it made the team feel tighter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're including all the differences. Anything else? All right. Assumptions. I shared this last year as well in the presentation, which is there's the thing that we're trying to communicate to other people, what the person says or what you say, and how much you might read into it or how much the other person is reading into it. So a lot of that stuff that's underneath the surface in the iceberg influences how we might choose to interpret what someone is actually literally telling us. So we'll dive into more of that in a little bit. I'm going to give you a short version. There's a lot of text on here, but this is the boring version of me, which is all the things that I do for work. I used to be a consultant in water and wastewater infrastructure. Went to school for chemical engineering in Hamilton, Ontario, and moved to BC just over a year ago. I was really involved with the Water Environment Federation, so helping lead young professionals programming for young professionals all over the US and Canada over a period of 11 years. I started a student chapter when I was still in university, and then went into leadership development because I realized I loved all the stuff I was not getting paid to do, which was organizing these kinds of events. Is putting together conferences and bringing in speakers and helping my fellow young professionals to learn. Allison, who you'll actually hear from in a little bit, if you wave your hand. I've known her since how many years now? 11 years. Because we used to volunteer for the same young professionals group. And what really energizes me is seeing people actually find harmony, where you might be very different, but you find a way to have meaningful conversations where you might disagree, but also disagree to commit. Because as a team, you still have to go in a specific direction. So I love talking about having those harder conversations. You know, feedback isn't just you're great, but also there's something missing here. And then how do we have those conversations as groups in effective meetings? So I focus a lot on how do people talk to each other, and how do we talk to each other in a way that we can actually hear each other even when things get heated. Little fun fact about me: I love salsa dancing. I did that I taught that for quite a while, since 2008. That's been quite a few years now. Some of the pictures that I used to work in. I used to be on site a lot for different construction projects in Ontario. One of the first mistakes I made as an engineer was I bought a fancy car. I bought a Mini, and driving that onto construction sites. If you think about assumptions, what assumptions do people make about people that drive Minis onto construction sites? Right, exactly. So it was always an uphill climb in developing relationships with contractors, because everyone had a truck, and it was like, who's this guy driving a Mini onto a construction site? There you go. And then I got into infrastructure asset management because one of the things I really loved to do was actually forming connections with people that were very different from each other. Because at some point, they had to come together and say, from my perspective as the financial person, from my perspective as the operator, from my perspective as the engineer, from my perspective as the developer or the owner or the city or municipality, what's the amount of money we need to devote for the next 20 years to make sure that the services keep running over time. So bringing those people together to collaborate, cooperate, was really energizing for me. Bringing people together, and then started my own business, went into developing workshops for young professionals and seasoned professionals as well. One of my biggest projects right now is with Duke University. I go there to essentially deliver 6-month-long leadership development programs for utilities across the US. And they could be from operations, they could be from HR, could be engineers, they could be every aspect of the water industry. And they come together and they learn from each other as a cohort over a period of 6 months. One of the things you may not realize about me, the stuff that's underneath the iceberg, is I'm an introvert. I had a lot of social anxiety growing up. The reason I started salsa dancing was because I could not do public presentations in school. I would crumble every time I would have to give a presentation like this because I could not regulate the anxiety that was coming out of my body, let alone get the right words out and then have a Q&A with people. So the guy in the middle, right in the center photo, is my salsa dance instructor. He also happened to be a civil engineer. And he taught me not only how to dance, but also how to stay centered when you're teaching anything or being in a presentation. I grew up in the Middle East, tiny little island called Bahrain. Moved there from the Philippines because of the economy. My dad moved to the Middle East when I was 3, and he was there during the Gulf War. So my mom and I would grow up, well, we would sleep to the sound of BBC telling us whether a bomb or a missile had dropped on my dad's head or not, where we were living in the Middle East. And then we moved there after Desert Storm, and it was just us, family of a unit of 4. And we became Canadian citizens in Toronto, really got into salsa dancing. But I share with you these random facts because I want to ask you, now that I've shared a whole bunch of stuff about me, what assumptions do you now make about me? So here's some questions. What's important to me? And it's okay if it's wrong. Just shout. One thing I want to design with you is I have hearing damage, so feel free to just shout it out as well. All right. What assumptions might you have about me? We'll have you say that again. 1 second. Oh, yeah, there you go. We'll just hold the silences a bit longer.
You value family time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're willing to go after something that makes you happy, not necessarily what you think other people think you should follow.
Yeah. What value label might you put on that?
I think self knowledge, self-care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. What other things are important to me? Kalpna.
I would say kind of looking at things with regards to anxiety and things like that, and then being able to be here doing this, I would say would take basically overcoming things and courage.
Courage is, yeah. Thank you. Any others? Yes.
Assumption from your fellow Filipino.
Yeah.
I assume my assumption is that you don't like engineering.
Your assumption is I don't like engineers.
Yes.
Ah,
No, engineering,
oh, okay.
because from your story, you shifted from engineering to helping
Hmm.
and all this presentation and stuff.
Interesting. Any other assumptions? No. Okay. Um, we talked about normality a little bit ago, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Adam's Family. That normal is an illusion. What is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. Um, I share this because there is no right or wrong assumption. What's really important to take away from assumptions is that it will inform your action. It informs your choice, which then has impact on other people. So we're going to take a left turn here. How do you build trust? How do you like to build trust with people? What's important to you? And just shout it out. I'll try and repeat it if I hear it. And the mic, yeah, we got to share. Say that again. Track record. So results and the history of results over time. Yeah. Kapna.
I think for me, it's coming through. You make a commitment, you come through on it. And that is a big factor of trust for me.
Yeah. Following through. Yes.
I feel like you can gain trust with someone by opening up and maybe sharing a personal detail about yourself or a weakness that you might have and just
Right.
making yourself
Right.
um,
What do they do with that information? Especially.
right.
Yeah. When you share. Yeah. We have someone in the back.
I was going to say bonding over shared experiences.
Thank you. Here's the next question. Well, quote. I share this quote because there's a difference between intent and impact. There's the intent of here's what I'm trying to tell you, but how it actually lands depends on the other person as well. Which was, I may have the illusion that I've communicated to you, but it might not be true. And the thing about trust and communication is what I think I'm doing to build trust with you may not actually be landing, because the way something that builds trust with you might be results, or it might be following through, or it might be sharing personal details about yourself. Some of us don't want to share personal details. So then for that person, it feels like I don't know if I know you well enough to fully trust you. So my point here being, to build trust, we have to also understand what does that person need to trust us? We want to get curious about that. Which brings us to conversation. Chris Argyris talks a lot about advocacy versus inquiry, which is really the difference between telling and asking. You like to tell stuff. Like, I'm going to share something with you. Or here's what I think you're good at. And here's what I think, based on what I've seen, here's my assumption about you. And my invitation to you for today is to turn that assumption, when you notice that you have one, into a question. I noticed that you're this, but I'm curious whether my assumption is true. Because if I hold that assumption and I continue acting on that assumption, then I may not be including who you actually are as a person, because I've just made an assumption. And all of this matters because teams, none of us probably in this room get anything done on a bigger scale without being on our teams. So what have you seen if you have been or are part of high-performing teams? What characteristics do high-performing teams have from your personal experience? The gentleman pointing to another gentleman right now. Like, you're part of my high-performing team. What characteristics do you see in high-performing teams? Behaviors, Everyone has a role, clearly defined roles. Thank you. Yeah.
I was going to say something similar, which you appreciate everyone's strengths and you honor them for what they have to bring.
Yes.
And you can really balance things out that way.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What do you consider to be a strength?
Organizational skills,
Okay.
communication skills.
So the technical
and yeah,
ability to do things
administrational,
as
and then
well.
there's just even just respecting what someone else is doing is a strength,
Sure.
and being uncomfortable in situations and working through them and not running away from them, that's a strength.
Right.
So each
Can you hold
person
it
has-
under pressure?
Yes.
Yeah, under
and can help other
discomfort.
people stay calm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I asked the question about strengths because I'm good at spreadsheets. Pretty good at them. I hate them. So I want to differentiate the thing that you're good at from the thing that energizes you. So giving presentations, for example, was not something I was always good at. I was terrible at them because I would freeze and I would forget all my lines and I would have all my note cards and I would forget all of them that I had them because I would be freaking out on stage or in front of the room or in front of my class. So at some point, it wasn't yet a strength, but it was also a strength in that I was motivated. I wanted to learn it. And at the same time, spreadsheets, I was good at them. I learned to be good at them, but it drained me of energy. So I want you to think about the things that you're good at, but don't necessarily love to do. And then think of the things that you love to do, but don't think you're necessarily good at. Because one is more sustainable than the other to really, really be good at over time. And so we're going to dive into understanding that from a person as well through the conversations as we go. So some of the high-performing teams that I get to work with through leadership development programs is that people feel safe to be able to contribute some of their best ideas. And it's not to say that the idea is fully baked by the time they say it out of their mouth. Usually it's half-baked. Like, I think this is an idea, but they're allowed to share it and they don't get shut down or they don't get criticized or made fun of right away. You can make fun of it later. But for now, let's just put it, that thing about brainstorming. There's no bad idea at the start. So we want to evaluate it at some point. People are motivated to sometimes put in above and beyond because they really believe in the team. They believe in the purpose. They believe in each other. They're really motivated to make sure they succeed as a team. They not only care about each other's performance, growth, and well-being, but they feel that others around them care about that. So it's not just hey, I think you'd be great at this. You should do this. It's also, hey, you're falling short. I think you've got more in you here and you're selling yourself short here, or you're not putting in the effort that I know you can. For whatever reason, no judgment. So that's what we mean by care for each other's performance and growth, is we can give each other that feedback, even if it's comfortable. Sustainable and resilient, what I really mean by that is there are teams that can produce great results, and I've seen lots of tech and engineering companies and teams that produce results, but have very low trust between each other. Have people seen teams like that? High performing, per se. Yeah, we see a few nods, but people don't actually trust each other. So you can drive it. You can drive results using the right incentives, but you might not have trust, which doesn't make it sustainable and it doesn't make it resilient. Because once you start losing results, you may not be able to survive that as a team. So today, we're focusing on the relationships part of relationships and results. How do we actually build trust and talk to each other over time? I asked you this question already. What builds trust with you? keep that in mind. I'm about to dive into a conversation with Allison, or Allie, as we call her. And keep this in mind around empathy, which is we may not agree or even understand the perspective of someone, but what we can do is accept that for the other person, it's true. This is their experience. You don't have to agree with it, but we can hold the space to at least hear it. Okay. Allie, would you like to come up? Okay, so before we dive into this conversation, the focus is going to be more on, well, maybe we'll step up a little bit so everyone can see you. We'll focus more on what I'm doing, what questions I'm asking, what behaviors I'm exhibiting. And a little bit about Allie, because we grew up as young professionals in Ontario, working for consulting firms. I may be asking you questions that I've probably never asked you before. All right,
Okay.
and I've designed with Allie already that she can share as much or as little as she needs to or wants to. So this is the first half. I'm just going to go into who Allison is, and then later in the second half, we'll dive into a real scenario that Allie actually went through, where trust was broken. Right. I'm going to start. For everyone, just observe what I'm doing. What's something that people don't always realize about you?
Ooh, something that people don't always realize about me.
Yeah.
Well, that's a hard question. He didn't give me this. I guess oftentimes behind how I can also speak in front of people and how I present myself, I'm like quite the anxious person also behind the scenes. And I do sometimes suffer from, bouts of depression. It's
Mm,
sometimes hard to get up in the morning.
yeah. And just for context for everyone, what is it that you maybe share a little bit about what your role is right now?
Oh, yes. I
Why you
currently,
moved to BC?
oh, why I moved to BC.
Yeah, that and your role.
Okay, so I moved to BC. It's threefold. We all lived through this global pandemic, which was probably very traumatic for all of us. Got a little sick of Toronto, I think, and I wanted to sort of expand my horizons and try a new city, but I didn't want to leave the country. But also, I really like outdoor sports, so I do a lot of cycling and rock climbing, and I wanted to have a chance to do that over here.
Yeah. And your
Mhm.
role.
Oh, I still work in engineering at a consulting firm for wastewater design and construction.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned that thing about anxiety. Like where do you remember that coming from?
Um, where do I remember that coming from? I think it often comes from relationships, like intimate relationships, so with family as well as personal relationships.
Yeah.
That's usually what triggers the most the spells of spiraling of anxiety.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
where do you see that like showing up at work sometimes? Working
Where
relationships.
do I see that showing up at work? Um, hmm. Can you reframe the question? Is it like how does it impact me in work or what?
Sure, let's go with that.
Okay. Well, I find it difficult to work sometime if I'm in a spiral.
Hmm.
So the previous presentation by Angela, she mentioned presenteeism, that I've
Hmm.
definitely experienced that where I'm like sitting at my desk, but
Yeah.
not quite able to focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my brain's overthinking about something else.
So if you were on my team, how
Hmm.
would I know that you're going through a spiral?
I don't think you would know. I don't think I necessarily show it.
Yeah.
Maybe on a day, maybe I leave early. Sometimes I've just had to leave the environment.
Okay.
Uh, Sometimes I don't get my tasks done as fast, but I'm a pretty fast worker, so that might be hard to tell, I think.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so if you're going through something hard, like and I'm noticing, I don't know, I make up like you're working really fast or you left early one day. What's something that I could do or ask you about that might help, or do you want me to? Do you want me to just leave you alone, or what would be
I think that
actually helpful?
depends on, like, if you were sort of like my manager, like a
Sure.
team lead
Or a colleague?
or a colleague.
Well, let's start with colleague, and then I'll ask you about being a manager.
Okay. If you were a colleague that I trust,
Yeah.
okay. If
Yeah.
you're a colleague that I trusted, yes, I would want someone to notice because that feels very validating.
Yeah.
Um, what would I want the colleague to do? Sometimes just a conversation, sometimes venting is helpful,
Okay.
to discuss about what it is that's going on.
Mhm.
There may not be like necessarily solutions. Sometimes you just process feelings, but I think on top of that, a more practical solution is like, hey, can I take something off your plate?
Mhm.
So the overwhelming to-do list gets a little smaller.
Right. And I want to ask you about the manager, and I'm just for everyone in the room, I ask a separate one because there's a power dynamic, right? And the power dynamic affects whether Ali might share anything with me at all.
Hmm.
So if I was your manager, what would
Are you a manager I trust?
goes back to the trust thing? Yes, let's say.
Okay. I think that would be very similar to a colleague. And
Okay.
then we could maybe talk about real structural changes within the workplace or the team to get things off my plate so I can have a bit more space to deal with what's going on a personal level.
Yeah.
If it's a manager I don't trust, I wouldn't be comfortable revealing any of that because it presents to me, I'm not comfortable sharing the personal thing. And so it presents like that I'm not doing a good job anymore.
Yeah. Well, if I'm a manager you don't yet trust, what could I do to build trust with you?
I think time can help. Maybe sharing, I'm thinking about managers I've trusted in the past. Shared, not necessarily shared experiences like going bowling, but like a shared experience in the workplace. So if we're both frustrated about a certain project issue, to kind of talk about that, or identifying the problems and saying like, yeah, that's what I thought what the problem was. So how do we fix it? So just sort of that
Aligning on
aligning.
the
Yeah,
same
that's a good word.
understanding. Yeah.
And then getting to know them a little bit more. There's sort of, I think Angela also mentioned about psychological safety. And so, knowing a little bit about them outside of work and if sort of the things underneath the
Some
iceberg, I
more
guess.
personal details around
Yeah.
them and
Yeah, would
feeling you
help
can connect with
me.
them on a
Yeah.
personal level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. That's it for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. What did we learn about Ali? What's important to her? Oh, and then you. Yes, go first. Security, security and safety. Yeah, and you shared something. Oh, you did. Sorry. Yeah. Trust. Yeah. We learned a little bit about what trust looks like for Ali. Yes. What other things did we learn? Right behind you. Yes.
I learned that Allie is a very high functioning human who really makes every effort to go it alone most of the time. And you're going to have to work at it to really figure out if she needs help or not.
Yeah. Is that accurate? Yes. Ali also is not great sometimes with compliments. So that's why she had that reaction when you complimented her. What did you see me do? And what questions stood up to you? Yeah, ask questions and
What hurt?
yeah, yeah. Did you learn anything about me? The answer is no. Probably. Yes, because the focus was completely on Ali. And that was an intentional choice. And that, of course, I could have said, "Oh yeah, like I go through a ton of anxiety. I can relate to that." But then I made it about me. which is sometimes good to relate to each other. That's how we bond. And in that case, I was asking Ali what her experience was. What other things did you see me do? What did you notice? A lot of
Good questions.
open-ended questions.
Yeah, you didn't fill in for her. You didn't assume what you wanted her to say, because some people, when they ask questions like, "Oh, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling depressed?
Yes.
You didn't say any of those things. You let her bring her feelings to the table."
Yes, absolutely. So I avoided any questions that would have a yes/no answers to them, such as, how did that make you feel versus did you feel sad? Or, so that those kinds of open versus closed-ended questions. Did anyone notice, or what did people notice? Let's shift my question. What did people notice about what word I started with when I asked questions? I just used the word 3 times. Is the word what? I avoid asking why questions unless I'm trying to evaluate or find root cause. Why questions are not bad, but I start with a what. I'll give you an example. You can turn any why question into a what question. So I could ask the gentleman right here, what is it about that hat that you like wearing? Versus why are you wearing that hat? So there's a judgmental tone to it that I added as well in the second question. But I can turn the why question, which is why that hat, into what is it about that hat that you like wearing? And, and so start thinking about the questions that you use and how you start them. What else did you notice I did? Yes.
Thanks. I noticed that you stayed pretty unemotional. You stayed pretty calm and neutral in your questions, which allowed what I believe her process to just kind of guide itself
Yeah.
instead of you bringing it in a certain direction. So, yeah.
Of course, based on the question that I chose to ask, I did end up leading the conversation in a specific direction, which is I dug deeper into the anxiety. And then if I was a manager or wanted to build trust with Ali as a colleague, I took it in that direction, which was so if I don't have that trust with you, how can I build that trust? And also, how do I know when you're spiraling out? Because that might be important for me to know as a colleague if we're out on site or we're out in the office. So as a team leader, I would want to know these things so I have a better visibility on my team. How would I know? With your offer and as well with the questions is it's like it's like in salsa dancing. Like when I'm salsa dancing, normally I'm the leader. So I'm leading my partner through. I perform specific moves. Like I make an offer and they notice that, oh, I think it's this move, so they respond to it. But in a conversation like that, especially with Ali, I gave her the lead because I asked an open-ended question, but she took it wherever she needed to take me. I want to share this with you. So she took me in that direction. And then when it was time for me, I noticed an opportunity to ask another question. I dug into one thing that she mentioned before. That's another thing that I demonstrated there. We're about to dive into the next half here, which is about trust. How does trust get damaged for you? Actually, let's break out into the tables that you were at. So we'll, as I'm noticing, there's a lot of me talking again at the front. We'll have you talk to each other and share some stories of or characteristics of when trust gets eroded for you. What do you need to experience or see, or that trust gets eroded? So I'll give you about 5 or 7 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back.
Whether it's or like also it's like send to number stuff you recognize it feels very like also planning trust. It's just I guess I couldn't say personal question, like I think it's like yeah. It's like you don't yeah, whatever that might be, when I
Yeah, kind of similar, like no follow through, all talk, no action. Yeah.
Taking credits. It doesn't.
Yeah, that's
Is yes. They have the idea that sure idea that this man go to his to the boss when I said I gotta take the this is and then he thinks take the credit and he should I go to and then
so it was not sure it's you so what trusters did eventually literally did a year like to each person. So I think those are I think it's have the same thing. So
well, let's talk about the results of the sure yeah that's a point. Yeah, because sure when you send me those found that one must be about in the future and we continue to think of granted. So that's what it's been. There's some or you should some violence it's it sounds like you have kind of a balance in about others where you can also have stuff there and get share especially the projects.
Took a lot of tape, sadly. What person is yeah, that's it. Getting back or me, telling that Something can I have after school? Like you, how really? I'm aware of.
anyway, not been aware of yet anyway. I don't think so. Serious lack in resource. Well, I mean, they have a CDC program, but it only runs half the time and they'll run a month or two and then they take a month or two off. It's not very consistent. Yeah.
Is your son qualified in the at-home program? I've never heard about them. What's it? Do you mind if I ask you? Just, I don't mind. He has a super rare chromosome disorder. It's called 18q deletion syndrome. He mainly presents with a lot of behavior. He's a few years behind.
Give you another 30 seconds. Complete your conversations.
Oh yeah. It's a government. Yeah, program. Administrative district. Okay. Children. They have.
All right. Let's get back to the room. What did you hear from each other around how trust can be eroded or damaged? Just shout it out as loud as you can for my ears and for the virtual audience. Kalpana.
We've actually got a few,
Yeah.
and so I'll just go through the list.
Sure.
Trust is eroded when when you're lied to.
Yeah.
Trust is eroded when you've made a commitment about something and you haven't followed through,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of goes along with just dropping the ball.
Yeah.
And the other one was a pretty big one in terms of a breach of confidentiality. You say something to someone, expect them to keep it confidential, and then before you know it, everyone knows about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for making that list. Others, won't you discuss at your tables? Yeah. Okay. Nothing new to add. Cool. Anyone else? Okay.
Essentially, it said putting yourself ahead of your peers to make yourself more successful.
Right. A selfish choice.
Yeah, the selfish
negative
choice.
impacting someone else. Yeah. Anyone else? Going once. Going twice. Okay. Oh, where's my clicker? There are other barriers to trust. And from both the person who's looking to trust someone else or who negatively impacts how others trust them. So it could be, well, I don't know if I share this thing or if I say this thing, whether it's going to blow back on me. There's that. And then there's the lack of accountability. You said this thing, you were going to do it, but it didn't happen. I didn't see it. You promised it. Lack of action. There's also lack of awareness, which was you didn't even realize you did that thing and it had a really negative impact on people. That can also damage trust. Lack of confidence. Sometimes that's outwardly in a sense, well, every time they talk about it, they don't seem like they know what they're doing or they're not confident in what it is that I would like them to be able to do. So I don't know if I can fully trust that yet. So we measure sometimes on an assumption, even though that person may be completely competent at it. You start thinking about the people on your teams that could use a little bit more confidence so people can trust them more. Overconfidence. Like they said, they're really good at this, but they're actually not that great. Low curiosity, I found also breaches trust with the people that, when I coach people, I'll say, well, they just assumed that thing about me. I didn't actually ask. And they went on about their day. So it doesn't make people trust you. So it goes back to the questions, importance of questions. I add the very last thing here on disrespect. And I see this a lot with people, not just leaders, that have lower curiosity, because they'll assume something about someone and they may say something that just has a really negative impact on someone. So I actually want to bring up Ali in a second here, but not quite yet. there's a tool that I use called SCARF, and I presented this last year. But just very quickly, without going too deep into the neuropsychology of it, is these are 5 things that people look out for and we naturally process in our brains and body as to whether or not we feel safe, psychologically safe. I'll give you an example. Status. So you think about your role, the role that you hold right now, and then you run into someone else at the conference and they say something that is really negative about your role. Like, operators, they're just blah, blah, blah. I'm not even try offending anyone right now. But just notice that if someone did, how you might feel. Or if someone says, I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna get that report that you asked for sometime next week. And then next week comes and it's like, okay, well, where is it? Oh, well, Kalpana is like shaking her head right now. Well, give me a few more days. A few more days passes and it's like you're not certain. Like when is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And so we feel this sense of discomfort or even frustration or whatever emotion comes up for you. Or let's say your manager comes to you and says, I need you to meet me at this time in this state. And you don't have a choice. There's a power dynamic there. It makes you feel a little uneasy, maybe. Why is this person asking me to do this? And I don't even have a choice. And sometimes too much choice also makes you feel unsafe. That's why we have like 30 tomato ketchup brands. And then you're just staring at the wall, trying to figure out which one you want. So too much choice, to not enough choice, or no choice at all can create discomfort in people. Relatedness is really interesting because we tend, say you're out traveling somewhere and you run into another Canadian and you haven't met another Canadian forever. And for some reason, you feel related to them. You might even trust them a little bit more than the people around you, even though it has nothing to do with whether this person is trustable or not. It's just that we relate to them. And similarly, we connect better with people initially because we see something in them that we can relate to. It might look like us, or there's a value of theirs that's important to us. Yes. If I was wearing a caterpillar hat, I'd be like, oh yeah, we'd be bonding right now. Right? But here's the danger with relying on relatedness as a way to trust other people, in that we may not even try building trust with people if they're different. If we can't see anything that we can't relate to. And this is where curiosity can really matter, because there is something about that person we might be able to, but we have to get a little bit curious. We may not, it's not visible on the surface right away. And then fairness, of course, is another thing that humans look out for, which is this fair? Is that decision fair? Or was the decision process fair? Was everything included that should have been? So just keep this in mind. This is all part of safety. Might bring it up again. I'm going to go back to this in a little bit, but I'm going to bring up Ali. So we've got about 20 minutes left. We'll chat for about 5 minutes. I prepped Ali to share a scenario that actually did happen in real life. All guilty parties, their names would have been removed, but it's I'm gonna let Ali share the scenario, and then what I'm going to do is just ask a few questions around her experience, and just notice what questions I might ask. I will be asking, and then I'll ask you, what did you notice? Okay, so I'll have you start.
Sure.
Is that good? Okay.
Okay, so the prompt I was given was a work situation where I lost trust.
Yeah.
Okay. I was more or less a team lead for a project back in our past lives. And one of my colleagues who I was leading kept showing up late to several meetings. Eventually, the client, and this matters, her gender was a woman, sent a private email to my colleague, more or less calling him out and referencing the 3 times that they were late. Client service, we work in consulting as a client service business, and it had impact on the plant because operators and maintenance folks showed up and the consultant was late. And so months and months after this experience, and it also impacted me because I wasn't that disciplined, so I couldn't speak to some of the technical. But months and months later, we're having a conversation, me and this colleague, and they say something that just really, really put me off. Mind you, they were probably struggling with some stuff as well, but said, I'm really upset about this email that I had to do this. My whole career is ruined because she had pregnancy hormones. And after that, I just couldn't talk to him anymore.
Before I ask any questions, just notice what's happening for you as you heard any of that. What was that like when you heard that for the first time?
It felt like almost like a betrayal of trust to not take any accountability, and to just blame someone's hormones for something that you objectively did. Yeah, and I was not pregnant or anything like that, but I have friends who are pregnant, and many people are pregnant, and it seems like an unfair judgment to deflect that blame.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers. I mean, there's the gendered aspect of it, but then there's just the basic accountability piece.
Yeah.
What values of yours that got stepped on?
Equity, accountability.
What does equity mean to you?
Looking at situations with a fair and neutral mind. Even if a person is pregnant, they are allowed to feel whatever they're feeling. It's not an over or under reaction. And in this professional situation, I think it was very fair to mention how many times they were late and the impact that it had.
Yeah. How did that impact your relationship with this person?
I didn't want them on my project anymore. First of all, they continue being late, so that was a problem. And we were friends outside of work, and we currently, I did move, but we don't talk anymore.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't able to share anything about my life because I live my life as a woman. So I just didn't feel like I could reveal more than surface level things that were happening in my life.
And well, let me try something a little bit riskier here. If I were this person,
yeah,
that told you, oh, Ali, like, can't believe they sent me that email, and they're ruining my career because of just a bunch of like pregnancy hormones. What would have been helpful, or what would be helpful to hear from me from that point on? Because I've damaged trust now.
Like in that exact moment or
Sure.
anytime? Oh, in the exact moment?
Yeah. What would you have done next?
I don't remember what I did next.
Or in this moment, what would you want to do next?
Probably hang up.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think I hung up. I probably like pretended to participate in the conversation, and then the second we hung up, I just was like, "What the heck happened?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you gave me feedback on that, on the impact,
I
what
would
you have said?
say that I thought he was being unfair. Obviously, I thought he was being sexist. I felt that he wasn't owning up to his actions.
And for the trust to be repaired, what would you have needed to see from me?
Okay. So this is interesting because apologies are not just saying the words, but recognizing the action and the impact of the action, and also maybe stating what you're going to do in the future to be better. So
Okay.
I think I would need all 3 of those things to hear from him without me sort of guiding it, and without me asking for it. I don't think I could have asked for it. I went the other route, which was like run away. But if he came to me and was like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something," and he went through those three things and said the words "I'm sorry," I think that would start, but it wouldn't be instant.
So if I were to give it a shot, it would be, Ali, I'm sorry that that I had made that remark that minimized and that was sexist and minimized their experience as a project manager, let alone, being pregnant. I recognize that their feedback was valid for being late that many times, and that it had this specific impact on the project. What else would you have wanted to hear from me?
I think from what you just said, the other missing part is sort of the social impact of that comment. I think it was a private conversation, but if there were people in a room, it kind of feeds that narrative of, I know people call it like baby brain or whatever, where baby brain is unreasonable. But that, those pregnant people are not unwhole selves. They are still whole selves who can make good decisions,
right,
and good judgments. And so if there were other people in the room, or like children in a room, right? Like they're really smart. They're sponges. They can soak up these implications.
Yeah.
I think that part would be missing as well. Because I think that's why I get really upset about that kind of stuff, because
Yeah.
I think it's more dangerous than just the impact on the project.
Right. Right. Can I just cycle back on one of the slides and have you point out something? So when we're thinking about these 5 things, like, which of these stand out to you as, oh, that got stepped on?
Fairness,
Yeah.
probably. I think also relatedness, I guess.
Like suddenly you can't relate to
Yeah.
how they express their values or what they think about other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Not so much, because whether or not I was the team lead, or even if he was the team lead, I still would have felt
Sure.
about the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say to the group to feel complete?
No, I don't think so.
No, you're good. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
I know that was not like necessarily easy, so thank you. So, what did you see me do? Well, actually, let's pull back. What's here right now? What are you noticing for yourself? How are you feeling? Oh, let's wait for the mic and then, yeah, thank you.
What her colleague did was a really common strategy to deflect from poor performance. They blame the other person, the other people, as a way of minimizing them. That's really helpful. So if she wasn't pregnant, he was going to find some other reason to discredit her, right? So it could have been the fact that, oh, well, she's on her period, or whatever. He would have found something else. And if it was a dude, he would have found some other thing, like, oh, I don't know, he's a short man, he's always looking for power. I don't know. He would have figured out some way of disparaging the other person.
Yeah.
Right? To make himself feel like their complaint wasn't valid.
Yeah. It's a complete deflection of accountability.
Yeah. And you see that a lot, right? So I don't know, if to get an apology from this guy, I'm not sure how meaningful it would be. I'll be really honest.
Yeah. What are other people's experiences in the room right now? Yes. Well, let's wait for the mic so the people online can hear.
I think first time he was late, should have just called him out on it and just, and just nipped it in the bud right there and then. I mean, if I'm running a team, lateness and punctuality is 100%. I don't accept anyone being late. Be on time. That's part of the deal, as well as whatever the rest of your job is. You better be on time. And I'd have called him out day one, first time.
Right.
So I wouldn't let it get to the 3 times being late. It just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. So what's coming up for you is, like, this is how I would have handled it.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're not, if you're, late twice, you're off the team. You're not cutting the mustard, sorry.
Yeah.
It's just,
Thank you.
just me.
So I'm slowing us down here, and you'll notice that the pace of this workshop is slow. And it's for a purpose, because we're often making those split-second assumptions and judgments, and then this is what I'm going to say next, and this is how I'm going to react. And it takes a short moment to destroy trust. And there was a slide that I shared earlier, which was the opportunity to build trust is actually in the moment itself, or shortly after the moment. Because Ali, for example, shared, well, I had to just run away and hang up, right? Which is valid, because you want to be able to compose yourself for the next, for how do you handle the situation? So, what else did you see me do? What did you notice in terms of how I ask questions? Okay. Yes. Yes. And I'll zoom out of what's happening for me right now as well. And that if I ask a question, it may not always land. And then it's okay to pivot as well. So thank you for trying to save the day as well for up on stage. And I don't improvising this is doesn't always work. So thank you. Let's pivot to, what are you taking away for yourself that's actually applicable when you get back to where you work and with your teams? Yeah.
So I think for myself, it's focusing on just the concept of trust. So it's probably something I haven't really thought much about. Like, I think of myself as a trustworthy person, so I think my assumption is that people trust me. So just being mindful of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can easily get feedback from people sometimes.
Exactly.
The tricky part is people won't tell you that they don't trust you.
This is true, but their actions might demonstrate that.
Yes. And you can check in with people as well, but that's the harder conversation, is getting to a point where you can actually ask someone, what would help build trust between us right now? Especially if you work with them for years. That's actually harder. What else are people taking away to apply? Ali?
I don't think I noticed this because I was talking with you, but
Mhm.
when you debriefed about that example with the hat, changing it from what to why, I don't think I noticed that. But it is very different. I thought there was like a lot of nuance with that switch,
Mhm.
and how it makes the receiver person feel.
Yeah. Thank you. Other takeaways? Common.
I think it's basically one of the things you mentioned, advocacy versus inquiry.
Hmm.
And I think you can get very goal oriented and forget to ask those open-ended questions. So I think that's really important.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot on teams as well, is that, well, I've shared it with everyone. I think everyone's clear that this is what we're trying to do together as a team. Then just even asking, like, what is everyone clear about so far? Because that's an assumption. or people might even make assumptions that they think they're clear. But once you ask, it might emerge people aren't clear. I mentioned trust building moments can exist shortly or even in the moment when it was eroded. But the question then becomes, and this is a long process of how do you develop the awareness to recognize the moment even happened? Because you may not be involved in that. And then the responsiveness to react and say something in the moment or shortly after. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage and skill to say, I'm going to phrase it in this way. And you don't know how the other person's going to react. And then learning from the impact of, well, I tried it, it didn't go well. How can I pivot for the next time something like that happens again? And then the bigger systemic thing is sometimes there's things in the system that just normalizes harmful behavior. There are cultures where it's fine to, there was this flyer that got distributed to my construction site. Every car had something underneath the windshield wiper, which was, don't be a pussy. And then a whole bunch of bullet points about being a man. I don't know why I don't know who did it, but it was a real thing. It was under each person's windshield wiper. Intent versus impact, I just want to highlight that, which is why inquiry versus advocacy can be important. Because just because we thought we said the thing or we asked the right question doesn't mean that it necessarily always lands. Listening is actually really hard. It was one of the hardest things I had to learn in coaching school, was to notice that I'm actually listening to the thoughts in my brain, even if I'm mechanically staying silent. Like we can stay silent, but my brain is actually like, okay, how do I respond to this next thing? And when do I respond? Like, I'm going to wait for that moment to say something. But to really hold back on those inner thoughts, that's hard. It takes a lot of practice. And that listening to that level is actually really uncomfortable, and to normalize it, because we do have the tendency to want to share as well as humans, and that's completely normal. What I mean by ask the uncomfortable question, but hold it loosely, is sometimes people may not have the answer to the question I just asked, which I asked many questions today, where, well, I don't know. I don't have any thoughts about that right now. And I held it loosely. It's not a failure. It's just, there's no answer. Cool, move on. And sometimes hard conversations might require you to keep moving on to the next question until you find something that lands. So your takeaways. I hear a lot from people, especially leaders that I coach, it's like, well, they have empathy or they don't have empathy. It's not a yes/no thing. It's not a you either do or don't. It's about building it, growing it. Because sometimes we make assumptions about people and we think we understand them, but we want to validate it through inquiry, want to ask. So I'm going to stop here. I'm 5 minutes to time. I want to make room for any questions you might have. And I'll stay silent until someone asks a question.
I'm a bit old school, so this might not sit politically with everybody, but when you're in a leadership role, my old school tells me you really need to separate the personal friendship group when you're leading, because it gets abused both ways. As a leader, you tend to lean towards that friendship as opposed to dividing the work evenly,
Mhm.
and vice versa coming back. And I think that, like, can the two be shared? Can you be a leader and have that level of personal empathy as opposed to just like maybe workplace boundaries?
Mm,
Does that make sense?
it does, yeah. Well, the question that's coming up for me when underneath that is like, is balancing accountability and empathy, right? Because we want to be empathetic with people, understand where they're coming from and why they might be showing up that day. With Ali's colleague, like said that thing reactively, and they might have been going through something, and there's an accountability for the impact. I see a lot of primarily in the tech space that I work with sometimes is they're friends with their colleagues outside of work, and they're all in their early 20s, and they made a lot of money through this tech thing that they're doing. This could be a startup idea, and so they suffer. They confuse sometimes. Am I talking to my supervisor right now, or am I talking to my friend? And how do I make it clear that I'm talking to you from the role of CEO of this company, or a director, or manager, versus I'm talking to you as a friend. We can just hang out. Yeah. And the burden sometimes lies with the leader, often lies with the leader to say, to make it clear, I'm speaking to you from this hat as opposed to the other hat. What does that give you?
Do you think the two can be mixed?
Sorry, I repeat the question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think the two roles can be mixed? Do you think you can have a personal relationship with team members as well as be the leader? Like you talked about those young tech companies, startups.
Yeah.
Does it work for more than a couple of years, or does it blow up on itself because the two get blurry?
From my experience, I see it be possible, but it requires over communication between everyone. And there are things that can't be shared because there's a power dynamic. Like, as a friend, I can't tell you that we might be losing a major investor next month just because you're my friend. Right? So there are things that are boundaried that you can't really cross anymore while this power dynamic exists. So that's from my experience, but still limited from the number of years I've been in the coaching industry. So yeah. Yeah. Hmm. You can, yeah. I think it's possible, but it's the boundaries need to be very clear. Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? Thank you for that question, by the way. It's a really important one.
I'm just wondering about managing your reports and when one of your reports has broken your trust. Now, my instinct as a leader is to be very direct with them, but I've never actually said to one of them, "You've broken my trust." What I have done is try to put frameworks around them so they can't do that again. And it creates kind of a hostile work environment. They feel under siege because they don't feel trusted, but we've never actually come out and had the honest conversation where I've looked them in the eye and said, I don't trust you to do your job. And so these are the things that I'm doing until I feel I can trust you again. Would it be better just to come out and say that?
There's a lot of layers underneath that question. What comes up for me right now is is making the expectations clear. Here's where you need to be. And in order for you to be an effective leader for them, that here's a requirement for me to be able to fully trust you. because I've been part of a PIP before, like a performance improvement plan, and it usually doesn't work because there's an element of compliance. I'm just asking you to comply to something, but I don't fully understand what kind of relationship I need to have with you for this to be sustainable. So there's a sustainability aspect to our working dynamic, because if I can't trust you anymore, it's kind of hard to grow, because then they can't necessarily feel like they can tell you when they're having a hard time, because there isn't that trust. So it's a two-way. It impacts you, it impacts them at the same time. So what does that give you from that answer / non-answer?
The short answer is it makes me want to fire them. Sorry, that was really honest. That might have been an overshare. I'm sorry if that has hurt anybody's feelings.
And there's no neat answer to that, because there's is it a non-starter anymore, the way they broke the trust, and is that something the other party is interested in repairing? Because there's an element too of, well, do you want to have a good relationship with me? Because this is what I need. What do you need? Because maybe there's something I've not given them, that just to check in. Yeah, that's my answer for now. So we are 5 minutes past. Thank you everyone for your attention and participation and everything. You can find me on LinkedIn, but also feel free to email me. I do this kind of work with teams, and this is just a scratch in the surface with having these kinds of conversations with the people that you work with, especially on your teams. So thank you very much, everyone. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
All right, you need to go to the top first. Oh, and it's just a token of our appreciation for today. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation today.
So just on behalf of the EOCP team, Jenna, come on, Allison, we just wanted to say goodbye to everyone, both here in the room and online, and say it's just been great hosting all of you. And to keep in mind that anyone that is attending Women of Water tomorrow, for people who are here, there's breakfast at 8, sessions start at 9. For people online, the sessions start at 9, and we'll be done with after lunch and so on. And mark it in your calendar, 9th, 10th, 11th September 2024 is EOCP 2024. Goodbye, everyone. Bye. Bye.